Dan Quinn going for 2 in overtime shows that he prioritizes being aggressive over settling for a tie.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the #1 sports podcast network in the world, and I'm David Harrison, your host, covering the Washington Commanders on ground for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI, and you can follow me on X at DHarrison82. Coming up on today's episode, abandoning a top 5 rushing attack to let a backup quarterback throw 50 times. A little bit confusing to some. McLaurin and Zach Ertz prove that they are championship pillars. And first, we're going to start it off by talking about Dan Quinn prioritizing aggression and standard and identity over getting a tie against the Denver Broncos in week 13, and why that's a good thing. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. Dan Quinn went for 2 in overtime to win the Week 13 matchup against the Denver Broncos. Unfortunately, Nick Bonito had other plans. Denver Broncos, off a deflected pass, win the game. The Washington Commanders dropped their 7th in a row, fall to 3-9 on the year. But that decision to go for 2 is actually a really good thing, really great thing in my opinion, because it shows that your head coach, Dan Quinn, is going to prioritize being true to who they are, upholding their standard of being aggressive, being an attacking, hunting offense, hunting team just in general, and is not willing to settle for ties. I know some people out there disagree. I don't ever want to see a tie. If there was a way to get rid of ties in the National Football League, I would be all for it. However, I also understand you can't just have them play until there's not a tie anymore, because this game is way too physical to tack on that kind of potential extra punishment. So Dan Quinn told Eric Flack of WUSA 9 in the weekly WUSA 9 one-on-one we have with the coach on Mondays, the day after the game. So whether it's Monday, Friday, whatever day it might be, that he has, quote unquote, no regrets in going for 2, saying, quote, sometimes the third possession is going for 2 as opposed to kicking the extra point. End quote. It's a one-play possession, right? It's an all or nothing possession, but I agree with Dan Quinn. He also said that it wasn't a split-second gut decision. Dan Quinn said, quote, I knew before the drive started, like, hey, we're going to score and we're going to go for 2. And that really unlocked, and that was the end quote, and that really unlocked the Washington Commanders' mindset of being in 4-down territory from the moment they touched the ball. So it fundamentally changed the approach to play calling for Cliff Kingsbury. And it's a good thing that you have that type of approach, that type of mentality. It's not a play it all, by the seat of your flying by the seat of your pants or anything like that. And in fact, I actually remember that touchdown for Terry McLaurin, while Terry's celebrating and the fans are celebrating and everything like that. I remember looking down on the field and Marcus Mariota is immediately receiving the play call for the 2-point conversion. That told me right there in the moment, like, this was not a discussion. This was not are we going to do it? Or are we not going to do it? And I absolutely love the fact that even in a 7-game losing streak, even in a season that hasn't gone their way, and even though they haven't necessarily been able to produce and be the team that they want to be, they know who they want to be. They've never lost sight of, this is what we want the Washington Commanders to be. And I think that's great, because I think there are teams out there, there are even teams with better records than the Washington Commanders. I look at the Philadelphia Eagles right across the division, and that's a team I look at and say, man, like, that team doesn't know who they are. That team doesn't even seem to know what they want to be other than just winners, right? Which, of course, is the biggest thing you want to be anyway. But, like, that team is in such disarray. And to be fair to the Philadelphia Eagles organization and the roster and the players and all that stuff, I'm not there every day. So when I say these kinds of things, I'm basing it off of outside, observations, obviously. But based on those outside observations, I would rather be covering this 3-9 team on a daily basis than be covering that division leading team on a daily basis, because just there's players lying in the press conferences. There's coaches that just kind of give answers that then don't really reflect what's going on the field. When I go to work to cover your Washington Commanders football team, I know what I'm getting every day. I know that what I'm hearing is authentic, even if it is some coach speak, some player speak, right, to protect strategy, things like that. I know that what I'm being told and is authentic, even if it's not the full story, to protect competitive advantages. Sean Payton even said that he knew the Washington Commanders were going to be going for 2 in his post-game press conference. He said, quote, makes sense. I kind of felt that if they scored, they were going to go for 2, end quote. So wasn't a surprise. He knows Dan Quinn's identity. He knows the decision-making process that he goes through. And honestly, I think Sean Payton would have done the same thing in the very same time. And Sean Payton, obviously known as one of the more aggressive coaches in the National Football League. So I think it's on par with what you would expect from this team. And I haven't heard a lot of pushback on it. And I think what's been really amazing in the aftermath of this game, and I got to give you all as Commanders fans a lot of credit, because, I shot a short video for Locked On NFL, and I even said in there that, I don't think a lot of people are going to want to hear this, but this was a really well-played game, a really hard-fought game, not perfect by any means, but this is the type of football you want to see the Washington Commanders playing. Unfortunately, they lost. But if you play this kind of football all year round, and look, injuries do have an impact on it, I believe, and other things have impacts as well. I don't think this team is 3-9. I think this team might be 9-3, 8-4, even 7-5. So it's a little bit frustrating on top of the good that you saw, because it's like, man, where was this all season long? But I've been really impressed with the amount of Commanders fans that came away from that game pleased and happy with the way those guys fought, with the way they competed. And truthfully, I was a little bit surprised, not because I don't have faith in Commanders fans, but just because fans, right? Fan is short for fanatical, and fanatics don't typically see things through a logic lens. So to see you guys, it's a great testament to the Washington Commanders fan base. And for those of you who are, why would you try to win? Just get the best draft capital. Honestly, it was kind of the perfect combination, because your team went out there, they competed, they showed some talent, they flashed a lot. It was a very entertaining game, and they lost. So now the Washington Commanders, I think, sit number 6 in the NFL draft order as it stands today for the 2026 NFL draft. So you got the best of both worlds if you're on that side of the conversation. So Dan Quinn, again, he framed it as aggression, you know what I mean, which I think is you go all the way back to Dan Quinn's introductory press conference with us. That's one of the words that came out as well. The defense had also just surrendered a 5-play, 76-yard touchdown drive. It was the worst drive of the game for the defense, obviously. Unfortunately, also coming in the worst timing possible. You know what I mean? But again, Denver Broncos offense gets paid to make plays as well. The secondary was leaky on that overtime drive. They allowed Bo Nix to complete 64% of his passes overall for the game, with 64%. Not terrible completion percentage against for a total defense, but certainly higher than you want it to be. 321 yards. Taking an overtime period into account, one drive. There you're kind of okay with it, especially with the big completion there. Overall in regulation, did a pretty good job of keeping Bo Nix contained for the most part. Third down was a problem for the defense. However, Sunday night, Denver converted nearly half of their third down, 7 for 15 on third downs on Sunday night. So again, you would love to get, if you can get that to even 5 for 15, something like that, then you're probably looking at a win for the Washington Commanders. And of course, you also have the offensive responsibility here. The critical turnover, Marcus Mariota's interception, intended for, I think it was intended for Terry. Actually, I can't remember who it was intended for, so I'm just going to wipe that. But obviously that bad interception in scoring position, you know what I mean? You can't give that ball away. That's going to be one that obviously Marcus Mariota wants back, and something that hopefully he's going to learn from. We have seen those types of mistakes, unfortunately, multiple times from Marcus, but you also have seen a lot of good moments from Marcus during the time he's had to play this season. And I still kind of just stand by. You have to kind of take some of those head-scratching moments to get some of those really good moments that you get out of Marcus Mariota, just like a lot of quarterbacks, right? Jaden, you have to take some of the heart-dropping hits, you know what I mean, to get the electric runs that he likes to produce. So it's just kind of the downside to the good side of the quarterback that you're watching. So after a nullified 30-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin, the team went on to get that miracle 4th down conversion, which again, Marcus Mariota keeping the play alive and just kind of doing things to try to get his team to will him to win. So that's one of those positives that you see there, and they end up getting the score anyway. Terry McLaurin in the end zone, and then the failed 2-point try. Again, zero disagreement here on Locked On Commanders with a decision to go for 2. In fact, I think it's great because, like I said, even in a 3-9 season, even in the midst of a 7-game losing streak, it just shows you that this Washington Commanders team, for everything that's going on, they have not lost sight of who they want to be, where they want to go, where they want to get to, and how they want to get there. Terry McLaurin said after the game, quote, "I think we earned the right to go out there and try to win that game. Nobody wants to get a tie," end quote. Couldn't agree more with Terry McLaurin there. Speaking of Terry McLaurin, he and Zach Ertz proved Sunday night that they are still championship pillars despite the inconsistency of their availability and or play. And the cast around them. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels just a little bit different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, not only can you react in real time, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. So if you rolled the dice on Sunday night on Terry McLaurin getting more involved against the Denver Broncos this past weekend, you're probably pretty happy with that decision and the way that the game unfolded. Right now, the Commanders are 1.5-point road underdogs to the Minnesota Vikings. As the game unfolds, you can make those live wagers with FanDuel. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action for the rest of the season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all year long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz proved Sunday night they are still championship pillars despite some of their own inconsistencies in availability and play and the inconsistency of the cast around them. Again, in large part, in my opinion, to injuries. But Terry McLaurin, man, 14 targets, 7 catches, 96 yards. Of course, had that clutch overtime touchdown. My notes said OT, almost an offensive tackle. That would have been weird. Clutch offensive tackle touchdown. No, clutch overtime touchdown for Terry McLaurin. It's amazing, man. 14 targets. He came into the game, and we didn't know this information beforehand, but he came into the game on a 25-snap pitch count, right? He was supposed to only play up to 25 snaps. But as the game went on, as the progress developed, as the flow got going, Terry himself even said, like, that wasn't a game you were going to keep me out of. You know what I mean? And Dan Quinn kind of knew, like, that's a competitor in him. You're not going to keep him off the field. Ends up playing nearly twice that amount of reps, played just over 50% of the offensive snaps. Obviously, most of those snaps were later in the game. But for those of you who were questioning, where is Terry early in the game, that's basically what was happening is he was on a pitch count. So they were trying to spread those targets and spread those opportunities out. But Terry McLaurin ends up, again, pretty impressive stat line for a guy who just came back from an injury. And that just kind of illustrates a little bit of the greatness that is in Terry McLaurin. And of course, the trickle-down economics of it, which was what we talked about before the game, forces some of that attention on the outside, forces the defense to have to spread out a little bit, prevents them from clogging the middle of the field as much as we've seen for most of this season with Terry McLaurin out of the lineup. And that, of course, helped open things up for tight end Zach Ertz, who was one of the players we identified that was going to have to be able to step up big, led the team in catches, led the team in a lot of ways on Sunday night. 10 catches, 106 yards, moved into 5th all-time in tight end receptions, passing Shannon Sharp. So, again, Zach Ertz, a legend of this game. And personally, I know it's the end of his career, but I think we're all kind of fortunate for being able to be a part of that and watch him play for the team that we cover and or cheer for. In a game with 50 pass attempts, Zach Ertz was that safety valve. We talk about the tight end being the safety blanket, for the quarterback, just no matter what team it is. Marcus Mariota certainly leaned on Zach Ertz. Zach recorded his 12th career 10-plus reception game, passing Jason Witten. So there's a Cowboy put in the rearview mirror. 3rd most all-time among all tight ends for Zach Ertz. So a very historic night for Zach Ertz. We talked to Zach in the locker room after the game, and as you would expect Zach Ertz to be, he was more worried about the opportunities he missed. You know what I mean? The drop passes, things like that, than he was the good plays that he made. But the good plays that he made, even in what's been an inconsistent season for him, just kind of shows you, man, Zach Ertz still brings a lot of value to this team. And if he decides to play again, as long as Cliff Kingsbury's on this staff, I don't see him going to another team other than the Washington Commanders. And given the status of the depth chart of the tight end room, I don't know that you can really afford to not bring him back if he wants to come back. But that's a conversation for later. Treylon Burks. Let's talk about Treylon Burks, a 5-yard touchdown catch. And talking about a 5-yard touchdown catch really just does not put the spin on it that you really needed to, because this is a man, 1st-round draft pick in 2022 by the Tennessee Titans. And you want to talk about pressure, right? Like, we talk about pressure of 1st-round picks, like quarterbacks, 1st-round picks, especially like number 1 overall, number 2 overall, like Jaden is, even number 3 overall, like Drake May is. That level of pressure is a level of pressure most 1st-round picks don't really feel, right? Like Josh Simmons, 1st-round offensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, like there's some pressure on you to be a good tackle and all that kind of stuff. Josh Connerly Jr., right? 1st-round offensive tackle here. Like, how many games have we really gone into really hammering home what Josh Connerly Jr. is going to do or has done going into or coming out of a game. But last year, you remember Jaden Daniels, every week, man, like every day we're talking Jaden. Every week we're talking Jaden, right? Nobody feels that kind of pressure like a quarterback does. However, if there's a runner-up, it's a guy like Treylon Burks, drafted to the Tennessee Titans to literally replace A.J. Brown. Like, that was literally the move. We're going to trade A.J. Brown, a guy becoming one of the best receivers in the NFL at the time, to the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to draft Treylon Burks because he's going to become our new A.J. Brown. We don't need A.J. That's a ton of pressure. Gets his first touchdown catch in his rookie season. Took till December, took till week 13 of his rookie season to get his first touchdown catch. And then he ends up battling a lot of injuries, coaching inconsistencies, quarterback swaps in Tennessee, all those kinds of things. Eventually ends up here in Washington, catches his next touchdown in 2025. So from December 2022 to the last day of November 2025, that's how long it took for him to catch his first to his second touchdown. And it was an amazing touchdown. One-handed grab, goes up. Dan Quinn told Eric Flack in that WSA 9 interview that Burks is quote-unquote hungry, feels like he has quote-unquote a lot to prove. Even with that finger that he broke against the Detroit Lions the week before Spain, Treylon Burks told his coaches, quote, "Yeah, I'm good, I'm playing," end quote, right? And he's out there playing with a broken finger, like it's surgically repaired or whatever, but like if you've ever broken a bone, you know, like that thing is not healed, right? So just a lot of guts out of Treylon Burks, man. So, you know, not a great stat line overall for the game and all that kind of stuff and all those things, but you love seeing him. You love seeing the work, man. I'd say, and just talking to him in the locker room, getting to know him a little bit, seems like a really good, good dude. Certainly a guy worth rooting for. So I don't know what his future holds. I don't know if it'll be here in Washington, but happy to see him do that as we go through the list of highlights, right? Like these are players. Obviously, it was a well-fought game, so there's a lot of players that did a lot of good things. Talk about the best graded player, right guard Sam Cosmi. Dan Quinn said he had the best game since he's returned from his knee injury. I think obviously the numbers and the tape support that as well. Pro Football Focus had Sam Cosmi as the Commanders' highest graded player in the game, 91.4 grade for Sam Cosmi. And Coach Quinn also talked about the trickle-down economics of that, how it's going to help Josh Connolly Jr., how it helps Tyler Biotish, the center, inside of him, all those things. 50 dropbacks, man. 50 dropbacks in this game. We're going to get to that here in just a minute. The pass protection was pretty good. 2 sacks on 50 pass attempts. That's pretty good rate, especially against a Denver Broncos defense that's leading the league in sacks and is trying to get the team record for sacks in NFL history. Sam Cosmi's dominance on the interior, a big reason the Denver Broncos weren't able to get closer to that record. And listen, if you watch the WSA 9 pregame show, Sean Springs and I, we both took the under. The question was over under or buy or sell the Denver Broncos getting less than 4.5 sacks in this game. Sean Springs and I both took the under. Fans, y'all chimed in. 80% of you said you're selling rather. They would hold them under 4.5 sacks. Only 2 sacks. So Sean Springs and I proven correct. We're gonna take a little bit of victory lap here. I think it's just indicative. I think the 80% saying that no, like they're gonna get 4.5 sacks, which is indicative of the way that the season has gone. I don't blame fans for that at all, but I'm happy to see that they were able to prevent that from happening. Frankie Louvu, linebacker, recorded his 3rd sack of the season, 3rd and 4th sack of the season, forced fumble, 2 quarterback hits, relentless energy is how Dan Quinn described his linebacker in the 4th quarter. Credit was sparking the defense that at times looked like it was going to be victimized for a good amount of points, but was able to stand up in critical moments. And of course, the culture check, WSA 9 interview again, Dan Quinn told us about building those quote unquote winning habits, even for the next decade, not even just like the next week, the next game, the next season, the next decade. The roster is fighting. They're going to give the best that this team has to give, even at a 3-9 record. And no matter what happens against Minnesota, you know you're going to get the best that this team has to offer. However, some people are questioning abandoning a top 5 rushing attack. 50 dropbacks with a backup quarterback has confused some people. We're going to dive into that strategy a little bit here on this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means it is gift hunting season. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames are the gift for you. It's a way to share enduring memories all year long, not just during the holidays, because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before you even gift it. My niece just had her first baby on Thanksgiving Day. So getting her, my niece, and her husband an Aura frame so they have endless uploads of photos and pictures, 30-second videos even through the Aura app. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named number 1 by Wirecutter by using the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now in order to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Abandoning a top 5 rushing attack to let a backup quarterback throw the ball 50 times is given a little bit of Eric Bieniemy vibes, and it was confusing to some people. But honestly, it may have been the right way to go. So let's dive into this a little bit. The Washington Commanders, look, at one point in time, had the number 1 rushing attack in the NFL. Then it kind of fell. It was like, now we're number 2. Now they're number 3. Now they're number 5. Now they're number 7. Well, they've been able to bring that ranking actually back up, and they're now still a top 5 rush team in the NFL. 138.9 yards rushing per game. In this game, however, against the Denver Broncos and that number 2 overall defense, that number 1 pass rushing defense, Cliff Kingsbury opted to throw the ball 50 times, ran the ball only 33 times, actually dropped back more times than that because Marcus Mariota scrambled on some of those as well. And the result, you could kind of come up with empty calories. This is the conversations being had about this. They racked up 419 total yards, which is a season high for a single game, but they only scored 26 points. And I say only because when this team has had, higher yardage outputs, they've also scored more points in relation. Marcus Mariota completed just 56% of his passes. So you want to see a higher percentage of his passes completed. And to some, it's being looked at as inefficient and untimely, saying you can't drop back that much with a backup quarterback. But I will remind you, Cliff Kingsbury asked him once during this season, what does balance mean to him? Because balance to a lot of people means 50-50. 50% pass, 50% rush. That's what balance is. But that's not really how a lot of offensive coordinators see it. And Cliff Kingsbury said balance to him basically pertains on the opponent and it pertains to the situation. So you could have 70% pass, 30% rush, and that's a balanced attack based on the opponent that you're playing. It's a little bit like spades math, right? So I think that when you look at this matchup, basically what Cliff Kingsbury saw was, yes, we threw the ball a lot more, but it's almost like an extension of the run game. Because you look at those passes, a lot of those passes were short. They were quick. They were 1.5 seconds. I know the NBC broadcast even kind of highlighted at one point how quickly Marcus Mariota was getting the ball out of his hands. So if you look at those passes as almost extensions of the run game, then you get a lot closer to that 50-50 type of perspective. They were 3 for 5 in the red zone, 60% red zone percentage. You'd love to have that 4 for 5. And a 1-point loss, of course, leaving 40% of your red zone trips without a touchdown is going to stand out as well. They're 5th in the NFL entering the game red zone offense, but we know they've had some red zone offense issues as of late that they need to figure out. I think the return of Terry McLaurin again, if they can get Noah Brown back next week, this coming week, that'll be even better. And of course, you had that drive at the end of regulation that stalled out at the 14-yard line and forced them to get a field goal instead of a game-winning touchdown. The team also lost the turnover battle 2-1. They're now -6 on the season, and that's something that Dan Quinn talked about as well. As much as he likes the way the defense held up, especially in the red zone for the most part, getting takeaway is absolutely going to be important. And, of course, protecting the football. So Dan Quinn admitted to WSA 9 as well at the end of his conversation with Eric Flack at WSA 9 that Josh Harris is also feeling the heat of this season. Said, quote, "It's emotional, it's frustrating, it's challenging," end quote. Quinn said about the conversations with Harris. Not that, he's frustrated with Josh, but like everybody's kind of feeling the weight of the losing streak and the way that the season has gone. So everybody's feeling it, but everybody's also staying locked in. Everybody's also staying focused on productivity versus negativity. Jayden Daniels is still limited. He's working on his functional movements this week, so we'll get more updates from Dan Quinn as the week goes. I feel pretty confident that I think Jayden Daniels is going to play this week. Again, I haven't seen him practice, so that's just kind of a gut feeling I have. We will see, and of course, we'll keep you up to date on all of that. Finally, before we get out of here, a little bit of an admin note. The Washington Commanders are not eliminated from playoff contention. However, they are eliminated from wild card contention. The only way the Washington Commanders can make it to the postseason is by winning the NFC East. In order to do that, they have to win out. The Philadelphia Eagles have to lose out. Now, the Washington Commanders have a say in that because they play the Eagles twice for the remainder of the season. The Washington Commanders at Minnesota, I do believe, with Marcus or with Jayden, they can win that game. At New York Giants, I believe they win that game. You've got the Eagles, you got the Cowboys, and then you got the Eagles again. And we know those Cowboys-Eagles games, they're going to be tough. but they're always winnable because it's their divisional game. So really, you're looking at this next game for the Commanders. Win this next game, and you're in the fight, man. You are in the fight. Philadelphia Eagles, however, they're at the Chargers this weekend. So if you're a Commanders fan that wants to see playoff football, you are a Chargers fan this weekend. They got the Raiders after that at home. That, to me, is the game that I circle and say, like, even the Eagles, even with all their internal drama, they're not going to lose that game. If they do, though, if the AFC West can come through for the Washington Commanders, that makes that Washington Commanders-Philadelphia Eagles game here in 3 weeks very, very interesting. And this Eagles team, I'll tell you what, the internal strife that's going on, they're ready to implode if they're given the opportunity. I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Just saying we've seen some crazy stuff happen in sports along the way. Red Sox, four games, 4 elimination games in a row, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we've got a mailbag episode, and we've already got some really good questions in the mailbag waiting to come out. So I can't wait to get that out for you Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments you want to throw into future mailbags, if you want to hear from me outside the show, if you want to help influence the show and just have ultimate conversations with me that go beyond the episodes of Locked On Commanders, become a Locked On Commanders insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders to do that today. For your next listen, get a double dose of Locked On NFL. Get the national view on the league and the Washington Commanders once in the morning, once in the afternoon, twice per day. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's podcast. To the everydayers, I see you, and I appreciate you every day, and I thank you again for coming through yet again today. For everybody, until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.